welcome. It's Thursday night, and this is another episode of Real Monsters with SK, me, and Wes,
Hello, hello, hello.
and a special guest, Kelly Evans from the
Hey, how's
frozen
it going?
north.
Yeah, it was still
Mm,
frozen, unfortunately. We're waiting for spring.
Yeah.
yeah. I
Well,
suppose you guys were getting what hit Minnesota up there. That same system still rolling through.
Yeah, we get something from sort of like the northern states, and it all rolls up to us, and then we've got the Arctic up north of us, and that rolls down to us. So, if you're
Huh.
in the Toronto area, you're pretty much screwed.
Yeah, kind of sucky geography. Yep.
well, we have. This is the first of our month of May look at women who kill,
The fairer sex.
the gentler sex.
Yeah,
Indeed,
names
indeed,
obviously
indeed.
given by men.
Men who don't know very many women, obviously.
Yeah.
um,
Maybe men who don't want to be butchered by these women.
yeah,
Maybe that's where it came from.
maybe so. Maybe so.
Please
Um,
don't kill me. You're the fairer sex.
you're not supposed to
Uh,
be like that.
no, that would not. That's weak. See, that wouldn't sway.
Yeah.
All right, yeah. So we're gonna start with. So tonight we have one that I've heard of and one that I had never heard of until you brought her up, Kelly. And we're
Okay.
gonna start with Empress Wu. Woohoo! Woo!
Woo. Yeah, no, she is
Hmm.
something actually. Um, so we're going way back in time. So we're going back to the 600s in China. So we're definitely out of my comfort zone with quite a few of the names. So I apologize in advance if I terribly, terribly mangle the Chinese names. I have tried to look up how they're pronounced properly, but so we're talking about Empress Wu Zetian. She was born in 624, and she was actually the only female emperor in China's entire 3,000 4,000 year history.
Wow.
The
Wow.
only one, the only female that ruled in her own right as an emperor, not just as an empress or a regent. She grew up in a very wealthy environment, and at age 14, she was the taken to be an imperial concubine of the Emperor Taizong. Now, to be a concubine, people might think, oh, that's awful. Her parents are forcing her into some sort of prostitution. But back then, to be taken in to be a concubine was like winning the lottery. It was where the best of the best went, the most beautiful women, the most educated women, everybody wanted to actually be there.
And
In fact,
and and to my limited understanding, it's a real mistake to try and apply our Western sensibilities to uh, to China in general and ancient China in particular.
absolutely,
Hmm.
absolutely, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Uh, which is an argument made a lot when we're talking about Empress Wu, and we'll see why. So when she joined, she actually became a fairly lower rank concubine. It was a very complicated system that they actually had for the system of concubines. So you would have the emperor and the empress. Then you would have the first noble consort, like so the main concubine. Then you'd have like another. I think there were another 7 levels of concubines. So she ended up as a fifth level concubine, which meant she wouldn't have had a lot of contact with the emperor, but she would have had contact with things like, for example, changing bed sheets. Now, this is where we
Hmm.
think she probably met the emperor's son and started up a relationship with him. Um,
Now
this is
that sounds really dangerous.
it's treasonable. Yeah, you could not touch the emperor's concubines. It was you
Even
would die.
even his own son.
Even his own son, no
Yeah.
one touched the emperor's concubines. In fact, when the emperor died, what happened, and this happened to Wu, is that they all of the concubines, and he had about 120 of them. They all had to shave their heads and go off to a Buddhist monastery to become nuns.
Mm.
Because if any, even after the emperor was dead, it was forbidden for any other man to touch any of his concubines. It was that serious.
Mm. Wow.
So what happens is Wu ends up back at court. The story is that the emperor's wife, she is jealous of the emperor's first concubine and decides to invite Wu back as a distraction. Yeah, big mistake.
Mhm.
So she makes it back to the palace. She has two sons with the emperor. And this is when it starts getting interesting because even though she is a okay, she's been promoted to a second level concubine. So even though she's a second level, she's still not the highest one. But she's had two sons, so that elevates her. Now
Mm.
she also had a baby girl, and the baby girl died. Now whether Wu killed the baby girl or not, or whether she was actually legitimately murdered, or whether she had caught death, we don't know. But what Wu did was she blamed the empress and the principal concubine of killing the baby,
Oh,
and
really?
the emperor imprisoned both of them.
What?
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So she's
Hmm.
already
Okay,
got
okay.
her
So
straight. No,
were these like his first sons ever that she
uh,
had?
no. So
Okay.
basically, before she went to the monastery, there was the old emperor. She had started an affair with the emperor's son. Now the son is now emperor because his father's died.
Oh, okay.
So
Hmm.
she's back in the palace. She's got it. She gets invited back by the emperor's wife, because the emperor's wife is jealous of the emperor's primary concubine. So yeah. So but he already has a son,
Yeah,
with
I'm
the
just trying to
empress.
figure out why he took her side on that.
She was well, when she joined, so when she became a concubine, she actually had an unusual upbringing in that she was wealthy and she didn't have to do, like, any chores or anything like that. So her father actively encouraged her to get an education, which was very rare for women at the time. So she was educated. She could read, she could write, she could talk about politics. She knew her music, she knew her rhetoric. So she was very, very highly educated, and one would assume pretty intelligent even by the time she arrived at the court. She was at the court for a while before the emperor died, before she got sent to the monastery, so she must have picked a few tricks up. So by
Hmm.
the time she came out of the monastery and kind of made enemies with the empress, she probably was a lot smarter than people gave her credit for. And she probably somehow manipulated the emperor. So anyway, she got her way, and the
Wow.
empress the empress and the first concubine are imprisoned. Um, the emperor starts to change his mind about the imprisonment. So Wu convinces him, to kill them. She's still going with they killed my baby girl, kill them. So and this is where some of the hyperbole comes in. So the story is that their limbs were all removed and they were left to drown or bleed out in a vat of wine. So that's one
Jesus.
of the legends about Empress Wu. Um, the following year, Wu was made empress, and her first son is made heir. So she just slipped right into that position.
So,
Now, obviously,
but Empress because she's married to the emperor, right? At this
she is
stage.
now. She is now. Yeah, so
Okay.
she's no longer a second level concubine. She's no longer a concubine. She is, yeah, married to the emperor and his
Man, this
advisor
girl's
and
a
his wife.
climber
She really was. Yeah, she really
and
was.
good at it.
So here's where it gets fun. There's a lot of people that didn't want her, obviously, to be empress. They didn't like her. They didn't think she was well born enough. So when she was made empress, the reprisals started. And man, this woman was just incredible at getting people to accuse each other and fight each other. So she had two counselors accuse another one of treason. So that guy was exiled. And then she had the same two counselors accused someone else of treason, and he was exiled and forced to commit suicide, just because they had all spoken out against her. She continues doing this, and the emperor actually, he was quite young. He was in his 20s, and they think he had a series of strokes that pretty much left him incapacitated for the next 23 years of his life.
Oh my goodness.
Um, so this leaves Wu on her own with an incapacitated but yet still alive emperor.
Right.
So she pretty much takes over the role of emperor. Um, she had the emperor's first son exiled just to get him out of the way.
Hmm.
She discovered that someone had written an edict to depose her. So the guy that made up the edict, she had him committed of treason, and she had, the emperor's exiled son, because she thought he had something to do with it. The guy who actually did it, his son, and the emperor's daughter-in-law, all of them were executed. And the son, the emperor's son, was made to commit suicide
Mm.
just because she thought the edict was, a result of a plan to try and get rid of her. The guy who drafted the edict, his wife and baby, at least they survived, but they were actually made to be slaves in her palace.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so that was nice. A short while later, she had elevated some of her brothers and cousins and things, and her brothers and cousins insulted her mom, so she had them all exiled.
Her own
Uh,
brothers.
her own brothers. Um, she then poisoned her niece because the emperor, even though he was incapacitated, he was still aware, and he was showing signs of making her niece a concubine, and she was like, "Nah." So she poisoned her niece.
Jesus.
She then blamed the poisoning on the two cousins who had insulted her mom, so she had them executed for that. The niece's brother, so he suspected that his sister had been murdered, and started kicking up a fuss. So she exiled and executed him.
Man, haven't
It
these
just,
people heard the rumors? Shut up.
I know, seriously, it
Mhm.
just goes on and on. So she, let's see, she leaves her son's wife to starve to death because she was jealous of her. She actually poisoned her first son because he wanted his half sisters to be able to marry, and she said no. So now the second son is now the crown prince. He heard rumors that Wu was not his mother and became suspicious, so she accused him of treason and exiled him and forced him to commit suicide. So that's two sons gone. The third son is now crown prince. He's probably
Wow.
wondering what the hell is going to go on. So he actually, oh, what happens to the third son? I don't remember what happens to him. Um, oh yeah, he is exiled and kind of taken out of his role as crown prince. So then there's a fourth son. Are we up to the fourth? So, yeah, we're up to a fourth son. So he actually takes over as crown prince. The emperor dies. So now she's got this weak
Oh.
fourth son who she basically imprisons in the palace. And she basically takes over. She now is ruling on behalf of her son, supposedly. And eventually he just gives her the throne. Like he just is like, right, I've had enough. He just gives her the throne. Um, so she's now empress in her own right. So that's what we mean by empress in her own right.
Mm-hmm.
And again, people didn't like it, so she started the reprisals again. Um, 12 branches of the imperial family were wiped out at that point. 12 entire branches of the family.
Oh,
Um,
that's a lot
yeah,
of people.
yeah. It's we. I don't even have the. I went through and did a thorough research on all the. Like I've got all the names of all of these people that she researched. It's just I thought it would be easier not to mention them all because it does get confusing.
Right?
But I couldn't even find the names of the members of the 12 branches. Like there are just too many of them.
Wow.
So
Man.
shortly after doing all this, she really kicks it up. So she actually starts an affair with a
Oh, so
monk.
she was just warming up
She
to
was
this
just
point.
warming up. Oh yeah.
Holy shit.
Um, so she starts an affair with a monk, and a lot of the legend about her focuses on her sexuality and how she was like sleeping around and all this kind of stuff, and she would have lovers brought into her by her servants, and I really couldn't find any factual evidence for this. But there is a reason why she's so hated, and I'll go into that after I go through a little bit more of her history. Um, so she starts a secret police and she installs copper boxes around the country so people can report on each other anonymously. And then the secret police will go and arrest them and do whatever is necessary. So she makes her fourth son, the one that's actually been kept a prisoner and has given her the throne. She makes him her heir. And then when a courtier suggests, oh, maybe he's not a good idea, the courtier is battered to death. Uh, there's so much of this. There's one actually quite I don't know if it's an amusing story, but she was quite interested in the mystical. So she became enamored of a man who said he was 500 years old, and there was another guy who said he was 350. There was a nun who said she could tell the future. Um, and at the time, her old monk boyfriend came back and decided that he was going to burn down a couple of her great halls because he was jealous. So she actually executed the nun and all her students, the two men who said they were old, the ex-boyfriend monk, and they're all executed. One for setting the fires, and the other one's for not predicting the fires.
That's one thing I
Oh,
was going to ask about
Uh,
the religion at the time, because this was about roughly 200 years before Confucius.
no, actually, it's actually around the same time. So actually, that's one of the reasons that she's so vilified. So the
Hmm.
major religion was Confucianism. There was some Taoism. Buddhism was fairly new, but she actually was one of the ones that made it like the state official religion. She was very, very pro-Buddhist.
Hmm.
The Confucianism, it's got some lovely sentiments, but it's very, very anti-woman. It's very having women rulers and having women in power was very anti the laws of nature. So any sort of woman with power would be just complete anathema to Confucianists, and that's where you generally get all of the really horrible writings about her. Now, I'm saying horrible writings. I'm talking like the stuff that's made up about her. It's kind of, if you imagine the stuff that's made up about her on top of all the stuff that we've gone through, yeah, you can imagine how bad
why
they
would you
get.
even need to make shit up?
I
Because
know,
she'd
right?
done
It's,
enough,
I
for
know.
real.
They were trashing her during her lifetime as well, though, just because it felt so unnatural to have a woman ruler.
Well, she didn't really set things up for people wanting a second one, did she?
No, I know. It's But the funny thing is that there was another female, not an emperor, like an empress, and the story about her about Empress Wu taking the first emperor and cutting her arms and legs off, and the concubine and leaving them in wine. That's actually very, very similar to a story that was told from like a few hundred years earlier. So when the Confucius are telling these really, really hugely made up stories about her, they actually are hearkening back to another fairly unpleasant woman in history.
Ah,
So that's another reason to kind of suspect that. So, for example, that story may not be actually accurate because it is, yeah, really almost identical to a story that another woman was told about another woman
or
hundreds of years
she knew about it and liked it.
and liked it. Yeah, that's true. She could have. Yeah.
She could have gone, good idea.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me see, where do we get up to? Okay, so she's by this point she's quite old. She's still having relationships. She starts up a relationship with two brothers, the Zhang brothers. They're kind of her boy toys because they're younger than her. Criticism of the boy toys led to three more forced suicides, including that of her grandson and her grandnephew.
Jeez.
So she was still like, in no, no, don't, you're not doing that. Her third son was called back from exile, so he was still alive. And he had a fairly powerful wife at the time who was actually taking lessons from Wu. So her boy toys start fighting in court. This results in further exiles of counselors. Finally, Wu gets incredibly ill and she's bedridden. This is about 704. Her boy toys are executed. Her house is surrounded, and she is actually forced from the throne. And her son, though the wimpy, weak one who she kept imprisoned, actually surrendered the throne to the son number three, who was called back, and he became emperor. So that's pretty much her story. I wouldn't even
Wow.
want to count how many people she just anybody who got in her way um, either was exiled or died or was forced to commit suicide. I think it was an English video, Channel 4, and it was a documentary on her, and they had historians at the end kind of going, well, what do you think? And basically they all kind of agreed she did what she had to do, given the time and given the situation. Remember, this is like
Hmm.
1400 years ago.
Right.
What she did do, though, is she actually expanded. She expanded the land. She consolidated China so that it was much, a lot like it is today. Obviously, not exactly. She was a proponent of writing. She published books on how to farm and made sure all the farmers got these. She made a lot of the land that was used for building or not being used. She made that arable farmland. She gave women lots of rights. She also actually wrote a manual for her secret police, though, called the Manual of Accusation, which was steps for getting confessions through torture. So, the whole writing
Whoa.
thing, take it with a grain of salt.
Wow. Yeah. Um, holy shit.
She
So
actually,
thanks for bringing that up because I did want to know if she, she got any good stuff done in between having people murdered and exiled.
well, I also watched another documentary that I actually, it might have been the same one, the Channel 4 documentary. And it was actually showed a lot of archaeological evidence from her court and what life would have been like during her time. And it was, equality was very important. She actually also got rid of a system that only allowed nobles to work in the court system. So she opened up
Mm.
so they had to take an exam, and she opened up the exam system to anybody who wanted to take it. She actually she had a female prime minister. um, she acknowledged that she had done something wrong. So towards the end of her life, she actually wrote out a confession, and she had it carved on a gold tablet, and it was taken to the top of a mountain, and it was a ceremony was done over it, and it was tossed over the mountain. It was supposed to be like a representative of all her sins are forgiven. A farmer actually found it. I think it was in the early 1900s, and they actually have it.
Oh,
So
no
that's kind of,
kidding.
yeah, he found it in a field. um, so yeah, and when she was buried near her husband, the emperor, and she had a sort of a giant stele put up, and she left it blank. The idea being that future rulers would look back on her glorious reign and write something nice about her on the stone, and it's actually blank. No one has
We have a
actually written
picture of
anything.
that up now.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, she's actually buried under there. No one has actually excavated the tomb, and they don't believe it's actually ever been raided by robbers.
Hmm.
So it's be interesting to see what was in there. Now, on the other hand, her prime minister, her female prime minister. So one of the reasons she possibly doesn't have a story on her tomb is because after she left, she was so vilified by the Confucianists that it wasn't deemed worthy even having having her anything on that tomb. Now, there's an Egyptian pharaoh called Hatshepsut, and she was pretty much wiped from history. Now, the Egyptians went and actually wiped all the stones and stuff off of her. But because Chinese history is so well documented, Wu's name is everywhere. You can't get rid of her, like
Right.
even if you try. Um, so her stela would just remained untouched. But afterwards, because her reign was so vilified, they actually broke into the tomb of her prime minister, her female prime minister, and it was trashed. It was almost taken apart brick by brick. The only thing that was left in it was the name of the person that used to be there. The everything was scraped off the walls. It was, it's like someone took a pickaxe, they destroyed everything. So do a lot of this stuff back then, back in the same time frame.
Oh, yeah.
Emperors kill
Sure.
people. But
Yeah.
the thing is, a woman does it, and oh no, anti nature. So that's basically how she's viewed.
Well, we have, and I don't know if it's just a Western thing. Apparently not. That that's just not how women are. It's not part of their nature that somehow women are different than from men in when it comes to violence. And guess what? They're not.
As we find out this month.
Yeah.
No, there are
Um,
there are a lot of female rulers, especially. I noticed that there's a lot of a lot of female rulers that are particularly ruthless. Nobility. Now, whether it's because you obviously get written records about rulers more than other people, I don't know. But there seem to be an awful lot of bloodthirsty women that are ruling over people.
hmm Absolutely. We know there are, well, let me put it this way. There have not been a lot of female serial killers caught.
That's
No,
because they're
not
too
at all.
sneaky.
Now, whether that means they don't exist in the same numbers or they're just better at it, I don't know.
Well, it can also mean I think that we're not looking. We it's when you think of looking for serial killers, you think of men in the
Right,
popular mind,
right.
and that's the problem there. If you're not looking for it, you're not going to find it.
But why? But that's a kind of like a circular argument, though, because why would you be looking for it if if 99% of the serial killers are men, you wouldn't bother looking for a female.
Well, if
So,
if if 99% of the ones you know of are men,
well, yeah, that's true.
That's the whole point, expanding your view. It's not
Yeah.
circular. It's just all about expanding it, and doing what makes sense when you're looking at cases.
Yeah, and then also remember, like you brought up earlier, that we're looking at something that happened 1400 years ago. Now I know there are rulers that are more modern than that. I mean, I know we're going to talk about another one, but it's a different culture, it's a different time. Um, I know the Chinese were hugely sophisticated with their writing and their history and their art and just about everything at that time.
Hmm.
But it was a different time. It was completely different from us. And in order to stay in power, when you've got so many people vying for the thrones in violent and horrendous ways, you've got to step up and be violent and horrendous yourself.
And and
And
and that's a fair
that's what
point
it's.
because that was the nature of ruling for everybody. It wasn't just
Sure.
her.
But then I also with her there. I mean, there's got to be a little bit of paranoia because she kind of looked like she was set off on rumors.
Mm.
Like she didn't she killed family members because they seemed to be disgruntled with something or because of a rumor, and I'm just wondering. I know of a couple of other rulers who got more and more paranoid as their life got like if they as they got older. I'm wondering if that's like some sort of occupational hazard for rulers.
Power
Well,
has a tendency to corrupt in more ways than one. And
But
I
it's
think
just not.
that could be chalked up to that as part of it.
but I
But it's
think
not
I
only. But
think
it's
the
not.
story that we heard today, she showed signs of paranoia from the beginning. It looked like.
Well, she knew what she wanted at the beginning. I don't know. I mean, she went for the top and she got it.
Hmm.
Um, but then I don't know if she. I don't know. I don't know whether the first half of her life was getting people out of the way and the second half was like keeping them out of the way.
Yeah. You know, who was um, who was Elizabeth's guy? This who had all the spies? Walsingham,
Oh,
right?
Walsingham. Yeah,
I mean,
he's awesome. I love Walsingham.
yeah, he was quite a guy. He gets vilified a lot, but he made her possible just by keeping her alive.
Did you know it
Um,
was actually? Did you know it was actually wasn't him? He took over a spy network that already existed that Darnley had set up. Oh, not Darnley. No, what's her name? Lord Burleigh. Yeah, the guy she made Lord Burleigh. Cecil. I don't remember his name before he was made Lord Burleigh, but he actually basically set up the entire organization, and then um, Walsingham kind of came over from France 20 years after she was already queen, and kind of took it over and extended it.
okay. Well, I guess my point in bringing that up is that, if you're looking for problems, you probably gonna find them one
Well,
way or another, right?
well, she put around those copper boxes all around the city, all around the country, so people could deliberately report on their neighbors.
Yeah.
And she also issued an edict that said that if you wanted to report something, you wouldn't have to pay for yourself to come to the capital. The capital would pay for you, like it covered your expenses. So
Oh,
she was very into like her eyes and ears everywhere. But I just wonder. I think she got a little bit, well, more than a little bit paranoid towards the end.
I mean, it sounds like kind of shit Stalin did. It,
Especially with that torture book. I mean,
yeah.
that's not even made up by the Confucians. That's a thing.
Yeah, and getting people to snitch on each other. Stalin loved doing that shit.
Yeah. Well, it's very effective, isn't it?
Well, it certainly
Well,
gets
okay,
rid of people. May not always be the right ones, but
I guess it's only effective if you live in a fearful atmosphere. So her going that nuts with the secret police and the copper boxes means that people were afraid. They must have been, right? Or they
right.
were being heavily rewarded somehow.
Yeah, well, then everybody gets paranoid and you go, when if I don't turn in somebody, somebody could turn me in,
But see, the
and then
weird
it
thing,
just it just goes on and
sorry,
on.
the weird thing is that she came at the very beginning of a dynasty called it's spelled Tang, but it's Tang, like Tang Dynasty, and it went on for about another 200 years after her, and it's known as the Golden Age in China. It was an age of expansion. Everybody was happy. Everybody was healthy. Women, well, during Wu's rulership, women's rights were expanded. They were then sort of shrunk again after the next emperor came in. Um, but it was known, it's looked back on as such a glorious age in China's history. But
Hmm.
then you see these little tiny things, and you gotta. I mean, of course I'm applying a 21st century mentality to what was it like to have copper boxes all over the country so you could spy on people. I don't know, maybe this was, I don't know, maybe this was a common thing, but the fact that it's brought up in her history is significant.
Right.
I mean, she was up to something more than, I think, just ruling.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it really seems like, you do you step out of line one time, one way, you just, and you're gone.
It seems like if you looked at this woman wrong in the hallway, it would be, I don't know. Like I'm reading into it. I'm reading a lot into it just based on what I've read, but it just seems, and I'm just wondering, she was very ambitious. She was very aggressive with her ambition in a time when women were encouraged to be demure, and they had, I have a piece of paper here, but they had levels of concubines that were like, they had seven beautiful women and eight stunning women and six charming women. It was all about how your talents and your grace and your beauty. And here she comes
Hmm.
in, and she was obviously beautiful because she made it as a concubine, and she was
Right.
obviously intelligent because she managed to get her way out of a monastery and back into the palace and bumped up the concubine list. But did the killer was she a killer before she became? Did she have the tendency before she became empress, or did having the power bring out a tendency or give it to her, or was it a matter of survival?
Yeah.
Yeah, there really isn't enough to tell. You'd have to look at the early life there, um,
There's not
and
much
look
on
for
her early life,
those.
sadly, except that she had a very cushy early life, and her father, and unusually at the time, encouraged her, absolutely pushed her, like encouraged her to get an education,
Hmm.
which was
Hmm.
very strange at the time.
Yeah, that would be. Wow.
So I
Interesting
guess
lady.
there's a lot of what ifs about that one. If you want to go into deep analysis, you could talk about her for hours.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
But how
Absolutely.
much fun is she? I didn't know much about her. I knew she killed a few people, but oh my God, I was researching the other day, and like I said, I was doing bullet points and I was writing it down. It was like, okay, another one and another one. I actually went through my notes, just doing a little bit of prep work for this. I got a highlighter and highlighted every single kill, and it was like, oh my God, there's like 16 on each page. It's ridiculous. Oh man.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Hmm.
All
Next.
right. Let's jump forward in time about
Yeah.
what, 1,000 years? 700
15,
years?
yeah, roughly that. Yep. And we're jumping forward in time and
And
jumping
halfway
slightly
across the
west.
globe,
Yeah.
we're
Really
gonna
good.
talk about Crazy Mary.
Crazy Mary. Bloody
Crazy
Mary.
Mary.
Well, I keep saying that. Yeah, I
Hmm.
know it's Bloody Mary, but there was this 70s movie called um, oh, it was Dirty Mary and Crazy Larry. That's what it was. It was
Oh,
a
right.
car
Yeah.
chase movie.
Yeah. Wasn't every movie in the 70s a car chase with, like, you
Pretty
know,
much. Pretty
the
much.
mustaches and yeah, anyway. Yeah, no, we're going to be talking about Bloody Mary,
All
and
of them after Bullet.
I love, yeah.
Right.
Bullet's such a great movie, but yeah, go on.
And they all had Burt Reynolds in them, didn't they? Just like some sort of rule in the 70s.
Or Steve McQueen.
Yeah.
Goldie Hawn. Sorry, we're showing our age now. Come on, we're young and cool and hip here. Um, yeah, right.
Hmm.
I've got red wine and I got some homemade cornbread that I did here. So yeah, I'm so hip. Okay, so Bloody Mary. Now, the thing with Bloody Mary is a lot of people get Bloody Mary and Mary Queen of Scots confused. So let's just get that straight.
Right.
Bloody Mary. Bloody Mary is Mary Tudor. She is the daughter of Henry VIII. She's English. Mary Queen of
Daughter of Henry VIII.
daughter of Henry VIII. Yes, and
Yeah.
we'll do a little bit of her background because he's just as fun as she is.
Isn't
um,
Elizabeth also a daughter of Henry
yes,
VIII?
yes, he's
Just to
her. Yeah,
Okay, just to be clear.
yep. So that's her family. Now, Mary Queen of Scots is a Scottish queen. She was actually born in Scotland. She lived in France most of her life. She moved back to Scotland, and she was around the time of Elizabeth I. She's the one that caused all the problems for Elizabeth I.
Okay.
That's the two of them separated. And Mary Queen of Scots had nothing to do with killing Protestants, like at all.
Mhm.
Right. But
Um,
she was actually the Queen of Scotland,
yeah, she
and
was.
not any relative to Elizabeth and Bloody Mary, or
Yeah,
not
yep. No, yeah, she was a cousin.
a cousin.
Because,
Okay,
yeah, let me see. I have to do this
because
off the my.
that kind of had to be the case, pretty much.
Well, yeah, well, her mother, if I get this right, I think her mother was actually married to was actually Henry VIII's sister.
Oh, okay.
Hmm.
Oh yeah, yeah. So there was so it's three kids. There was Henry VIII, and there was Margaret Tudor, Mary Tudor, the three siblings. Henry became Henry VIII. Everybody knows.
Hmm.
And the two siblings were married off into foreign countries. One of them to Scotland, and one of them to somewhere in Europe. And then Mary, Queen of Scots, was the daughter of that union. So she is actually a cousin to both of them.
Gotcha.
It's all terribly incestuous.
Yeah.
So yeah, so Mary is Mary's kind of I'm going to start off by saying yes, she killed a lot of people. I think like well over 200. I actually have a spreadsheet of
What?
everybody she killed, and all the places because I got bored one day. So I have the spreadsheet with everybody she killed, and you can actually sort it by like the last name or the age or where they were burned, if you want to, Smithfield or whether it was Canterbury or, that sort of thing, just for fun,
Wow. Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
but anyway,
Wow.
um, but she is, to me, and it took me a long time to get my head around this. She is a fairly sympathetic character.
She is. You
Because
saying she is?
okay, she is, she kind of had a sucky life. She had a raw deal. So basically, mom and dad, Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon, married and only had one surviving child. Catherine of Aragon had, I think, about 8 miscarriages and two or three live births that didn't last. One son lasted a month, but basically Mary was the only kid who made it.
Hmm.
And after 20 years of marriage, it was obvious that she wasn't going to have any more children, and Henry really wanted a son, so he basically gave her up. He just got rid of her.
And so this
Um,
is what started all of the many wives thing, right?
Yeah. So basically, he had to wait 7 years for Anne Boleyn because there was the whole, oh, I need a divorce, so I won't give you one, and the Pope didn't
Ah,
want to give him one. And meanwhile, Mary is stuck out in a castle in Wales and basically being ignored. So Anne Boleyn and Henry they finally get together, and they have a daughter who is Elizabeth. Elizabeth is named the heir to the throne. Mary is bastardized, and after that, if her situation was bad, it got worse. She got no money. She had to fend for herself. She was now Lady Mary the Bastard.
I
Uh,
always find that hilarious with this, how the Episcopal Church was basically founded on that whole divorce thing, but
yeah, it really
I know
was.
it basically is. It's everybody thinks that the Protestant Reformation actually started in England, but it actually started with Martin Luther. Um,
Right.
well,
and
sure, the 95
Henry,
Theses.
yeah, and Henry sort of picked up on it various of his counselors, and he wanted a divorce anyway. And a
And
couple of
it
counselors said
served his purposes.
it served his purposes. One counselor said, all that money from the chapels that are going to Rome, you could have that. So that was pretty much it.
Ah.
Um, so he married Anne. They had a daughter. Mary was declared a bastard, and then
Really?
Anne.
Do they have to do that? Really? I mean, that
Well,
seems a little punitive.
they
You,
couldn't. Well, they had to because they couldn't make Anne's marriage legitimate unless they made Henry's previous marriage like he had to be divorced.
mm,
And because the Pope wouldn't give him a divorce, he made himself head of the church and he divorced himself from her so that it legitimized his marriage to Anne and his decision, of course, as well. So it, made him feel better. Had a daughter, had another miscarriage. It was a son. He was already sick of Anne by this point. It took 7 years to get her, and they were only married for about 3 years. When he decided he didn't want her, found someone else, so he cut her head off. He let his first wife languish, and she kind of just died. She may have had cancer.
Cut her head
Um,
off because it was easier than starting
it was just
another
easier, yeah.
church.
Well, he accused her of she was never accused of witchcraft. She was officially accused of treason because she was blamed for sleeping with other men, which she never did, but it was trumped up charges. And because you were the property of the king, and if
Mm.
anybody else slept with you, it was treasonous. So that's basically why she got it. And five other guys went with her, including her brother, bizarrely.
Whoa.
Um, so long
So
story
so
short,
clearly things have improved a great deal in the 700 years since Wu.
yeah, damn it, you can't just cut off people's head anymore like he used to be able to. I know. He even got a special swordsman in from Calais because she wasn't going to go on the block. She was going to stand up on her, like, sort of like, not stand, but, go on her knees and kind of like upright so that her head was sliced off instead of down
Oh,
with the axe. Because English axemen had a really bad reputation at the time.
of needing multiple whacks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. In fact, Henry had an old woman who was a threat to his throne. She was of the old Plantagenet blood, and he had her executed. And the executioner, I don't know, I think he took 3 or 4 times. It was
Oh,
awful.
jeez.
um, but anyway, let's see. Henry goes through another wife. Finally has a son, but she dies 12 days after she has a son. But he finally has a son, so yay. Um, he marries another woman after that who comes from Cleves. As soon as he sees her, he thinks she's disgusting, so they get that marriage annulled. She's actually the smartest of all of them. She got off scot-free because she didn't have to sleep with him. She
Oh,
got all kinds of land. She was forever known as the sister to the king, and she was actually a guest at court, and she did very well for herself. She never went back to Cleves. She had a great time, so she did
and she
well.
kept her head.
She kept her head.
Wow.
So let's see.
Well,
That
that
was
worked
one, two,
out.
that's four. Queen number five lost her head because she really did cheat on him because she was a bit of a silly. And queen number six outlived him because he was, kind of old and fat and etc. Um, After he died, the crown went to his son, who was 17 at the time, and he only lasted a few years. He had tuberculosis.
Oh,
And next in line was supposed to be Mary. But he decides, he's Protestant. He decides, no, Mary's Catholic, forget it. So he names
which
someone
which
else.
which he? The son?
Oh, sorry, the prince, the young Prince Edward.
Okay.
So he had a son. He had her by the third queen who died 12 days later. So his name is Edward. So Edward's king, and he's only king for about 5 years because he's very, very ill. And instead of honoring the agreement to make Mary queen, he decides someone else who's Protestant is going to be queen. So that happens. Um, she only lasts 9 days as queen because the country is so offended by the lack of following the rule that they actually do kind of come behind Mary, and she actually becomes queen.
Oh,
So
really?
yes, yeah.
Mhm.
So and she imprisons this poor woman who was made queen for 9 days in prison, and she doesn't want to kill her. It's not the girl's fault. Her family have forced her into it. Her name's Jane, and poor Jane is in prison for a year before she actually and a rebellion is started, and it's kind of like, oh, put Jane or put the Protestants back on the throne. So Jane sadly does lose her head.
Oh,
But okay, so this is when it starts getting interesting. So Mary, when she comes to the throne, promises everybody everything's going to be okay. Religion's not going to be an issue. Yeah, you just worship however you want because it's pretty much already started the Reformation. It's already half Protestant by this point. And she's like, yeah, no problem. I'm not going to do anything. 2 weeks later, she starts burning people for being Protestants. It's
whoa.
like she psychologically she is convinced that God put her on the throne to return the country to Catholicism. And she actually does go back to the Pope and she talks to him and she actually gets the country accepted back by Rome. Like she actually does get the
Whoa.
country turned back to Catholic again, judging by, by those standards. And then because there are so many Protestants around and they're just pesky Protestants, so we must get rid of them. She just starts burning them. She almost every other day there's just, and I've looked through the list of people she burned, and there were children, there were wives, there were weavers, there were fishermen, there were some nobles. I don't know the circumstances under which like how they were accused. or how she got her information. A lot of it was done by her counselors, and I'm assuming they had a similar spy network that Wu did. I'm also assuming that people may have reported on each other because the fear at that time. But yeah, she actually did start burning people alive. And I don't know, I think I sent you a picture that showed how
Oh yeah.
how there was a picture of how it was stacked up, because a lot of people think it's like a pole with a bunch of branches at the bottom of it. And I think there were like hay bales all around it, and it was really, really, really stacked with an awful lot of wood
Coming up.
and hay. And it was just, when I saw that, I was horrified because I mean, I know being burned alive is horrific. So that's the guy being burned, but there was another picture showing um, how they actually set up like the actual burning area.
Right.
And it wasn't just a bunch of sticks and stuff leaned up. It was actually almost like these 6-foot bales of hay that were sort of like all surrounding the pole in the middle, and the person stood in the middle of it, and everything was set on fire. It was awful.
Yeah, uh, it's not a the kind of death anybody wishes for.
There were a
Yeah.
few examples of people. So basically, the reason you were burned is because even if you recanted, your soul still needed to be cleansed. Now, a couple of the nobles recanted and were let off. I'm assuming they were needed for something or because they were nobles. But basically, what would happen is you would burn anyway. So the idea was to try and, yeah. So basically, the idea was for,
Where's
I
the
believe,
incentive?
I know. Well, the incentive is that I want to save my soul,
Oh,
and the fire will cleanse me. But depending on what you believe, like I don't know, like, oh, you got a picture of yeah, Mary started, if you thought that was a little bonkers, Mary started going even more a little bonkers. She actually married a foreign prince, Prince Philip of Spain, and he was a lot younger than her, and he wasn't quite happy with the marriage, so he basically stayed away most of the time. And she claimed she was pregnant, and then that ended up not coming to anything. And then she claimed she was pregnant a second time, even though he was only in the country for like a week, to talk her into going into a foreign war. And then he just really took off very soon, and it's doubtful whether they even slept together. So she had these phantom pregnancies. She was sure that someone had poisoned this baby, that it was never there. She started actually sleeping in a breastplate. She kept a dagger under her pillow. She started getting really super paranoid about plots to kill her.
wow.
And then meanwhile, oh yeah, you can see the picture. Yeah, that last picture on the screen showed all the bales sort of just piled up around people. It's like they were creating a little house around themselves.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, basically the incentive was to save your soul. Surprisingly, a lot of these people, and they're known as the Marian martyrs, they actually went to the flames, not sticking to their guns. Like they were heavy, heavy Protestants, and this is what they believed, and they actually stuck to it even in the middle of all the flames. So,
Well,
um,
you get down to that, one of the bigger motivators with the soul thing there would be purgatory. That the flames, in a sense, would start, purging what your sins were, and you
yeah,
might, and you'd
okay,
spend less time in purgatory.
so if you were on the fence, so if you believe in purgatory, that means you're Catholic, which would mean that
Yeah.
you wouldn't be burning for being a Protestant anyway. If you were on the fence about it and it was like you were just about to burn, then yeah, you might confess and switch back to Catholicism because you still had enough of that fear of purgatory.
Hmm.
Protestants, I should know this. I don't think Protestants have purgatory, do we?
No, they don't.
I don't think we do. No.
Nope.
Sorry, I really should know more.
No, no, I know for a fact they don't. It's not a Protestant teaching.
Yeah.
In
Well,
fact,
I went to
it's
Sunday.
barely a Catholic teaching anymore, too. But
Well, I went to oh well actually okay, so I went to I was brought up as a Scottish Presbyterian. Just it was basically I went to Sunday school, and then once I was old enough to decide for myself, my parents let me decide for myself, which was awesome. So I got the normal Sunday school teaching and all that kind of stuff in a Protestant perspective. And then when I was in university, I dated a Catholic guy for 4 years, and sometimes part of our Saturday night dates would be to go to mass on Saturday night. and they actually did. They actually did ask for people to pray for people in purgatory, like most weeks.
Yeah.
And I think they had special masses like during the week, so that you could actually specifically go and pray for souls in purgatory, so that they could be less tormented or get out earlier. So it's still very much a part of the religion. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, for the most part, although Pope Francis recently had released something that was, I thought, a revised look at
Oh, he did.
purgatory.
Yeah, I probably should. Oh, damn. Yeah, I should have looked at that. Yep, you're
Uh,
I
right.
mean,
ear-
in,
Early
in
release
coming,
program.
in coming from mine, I was raised Catholic in a half Catholic, half Lutheran house,
Oh,
so
wow.
going
Interesting.
to both of them. But yeah, when I still consider myself a Catholic, but not a Roman Catholic. I consider myself an old Catholic, which their history is interesting. It's actually they're Dutch, and they basically had a schism with Rome. They believe in the Catholic theology, but they don't believe in things like papal infallibility or the Pope even being their ruler. So,
Yeah.
I have to look this up because I'm familiar with the schism during like what is it, the 10, 6, no. There was the Great Schism, the East-West Schism, and I'm familiar with that one. And I'm familiar with the
mhm.
Pope and the anti-Pope, but I'm not familiar with your schism. You have to send me the details. I want to look it up.
The Union of Utrecht, if I can find a
Oh,
source that is not Wikipedia.
What do you
Sorry, I don't
mean?
believe in using that.
no, that's okay. No, just tell me what I would Google, and I've actually got a degree in religious studies, so I've probably got a book on my shelf someplace that I can find
The,
it.
the Union of Utrecht, Utrecht. Put
Yeah.
a I put a link in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Sorry, completely off topic, but
But
I love religion.
another interesting thing there, my family's business that was started by my great great grandfather actually
Mhm.
prints the missals for the Catholic Church,
Oh, that is so cool.
for
Wow.
the Roman Catholic
The
Church.
Roman Catholic Church. Okay, that is very cool.
Mhm.
So
Um,
I think the whole Protestant Catholic thing that was going on during the Reformation period probably forced Mary's hand. Maybe, I don't know. It's hard to justify her actions. I mean, given her horrible upbringing and the fact she was pretty much abandoned, and then she was a bastard. She was actually also made to go and work in the household of Elizabeth when she was a baby. So that can't have been very nice when she was
Oh.
17.
mhm.
Um, she was also threatened by her father when he wouldn't sign. Henry wanted everybody to sign over the fact that he was married to Anne and the succession and that sort of thing, and she wouldn't sign it because she didn't agree with it, and she was threatened with
Mhm.
death. She was threatened with death for that, and so she didn't have a pleasant upbringing. So she must have it must have affected her psychologically in some way, so that when she
Well,
and
yeah.
and the, re- and
Jesus.
the religious and her religious fervor together, you've got a little spark of something and religious fervor, and you put those two together, that's kind of combustible. Oh,
Yeah.
Oh,
sorry,
sure.
no, sorry, oh god, sorry about the pun. That was completely by
Combustible.
accident. um but I'm just wondering how much of that religious
Did
fervor
she
and how much
carry a
of that, like,
torch?
yeah. Well, she certainly carried a torch for her husband, because man, did she love him. He did not love her, but she was enamored.
The Spanish dude?
The Spanish dude, yeah. Like, no one liked him really, and no one wanted him over. And in fact, he actually started courting Elizabeth before Mary was even dead.
Mm. Well,
Whoa.
Because, he wanted England. He wanted England's resources. He actually tried to get Mary to commit to English resources in a war with Spain against France. And she actually agreed to it. And everybody was like, oh, you're kidding me. Like, you can't do this. Because she did everything he wanted. Um, so people were not happy with that. But fortunately, he didn't spend a lot of time in England. He wasn't a fan of England or Mary.
Yeah.
mm,
So that little picture, that little graphic you've got on the screen right now, it actually shows how many people were
Burn.
burned by like the Tudor family. So Mary, over her 4 years, burned 300 people. So that's 75 people each year. So Henry VIII, the nasty guy. Oh, my picture's gone. Damn. Henry VIII, the really nasty one. I
Yeah,
think he burned
let me get it
he,
up in more permanent. not part of the slideshow.
I do like the slideshow, though. I love all these pictures of, yeah, look at these guys. They've got wood piled up to their chest.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That's mad.
Well, you don't want to do a partial job with that, I guess.
Well, I don't know if it's true, and I really should have looked this up, but I've seen, I don't know if everybody's seen the movies and TV shows where they will give the person, like a kind person, will give the person who's about to be burned a little bag of gunpowder to wear around their neck, so that when the flames reach,
Oh,
yeah.
interesting.
Um, so yeah, I don't know if that's true or not. It seems like a really nice thing to do. Okay, there we go. So, okay, so Mary, over her 4 years, burned 300 people, so that's 75 each year.
Wow.
Her father ruled for nearly 40 years and burned 2 people each year, so 81 people. His father burned one every 2.5 years, and Elizabeth, her sister, who ruled for 45 years, only ever burned 5 people. That was one every 9 years. So that shows you really how many people over, like, she only ruled for 4 years
Wow.
and she burned like I mean like
That's
300 is a
really
nice
out of
round number.
proportion. Yeah.
Yeah, and Henry was basically the one who started all the fuss. Now Henry burned people who were a little bit too Protestant. So he was kind of cut in the middle. He was in a transition period where he liked a lot of the Protestant ideas. He liked the freedom. He liked the break from the church. But there were still like some of the tenets of the church he liked. Like there was a discussion about the transubstantiation and the Lord's Prayer and the doxology and all that kind of stuff. So he was still transitioning. So basically, what they refer to as Protestant is kind of what I would refer to as what we now call Anglicanism. So it's not the severe Protestant Martin Luther, everybody sit on stone benches, life is hell type of
Puritanism.
Protestantism. Yeah, it's more a gentler kind of Protestantism, but they still do masses and they still have like incense and things like that, which a lot of Protestants don't. So I guess fine lines all over the place.
Yeah, everybody wants their religion just right for them.
But there is also the Church of England still actually does exist though. So he did officially start the
Yeah.
church. He was the head of it, and it is still going. God, it sounds like I'm talking about a cult. Sorry.
What's the difference technically? I,
Oh,
I mean,
oh.
there. I mean, somewhere there's a line, right? One side you're religion, the other side you're a cult.
Well, it gets difficult because even within religions, there's divisions and schisms, and
Yeah.
it's just like there's so many branches. It's just I don't know how people can even talk to each other sometimes when you're talking about. Well, I guess that's why you don't talk about religion or politics, right?
Right.
hmm
But here we are, brave new world.
So what happened? Mary reigned for 4 years, according to your little drawing there.
Yep.
And then how did she get ousted? Because Elizabeth took over, right?
Elizabeth took over, yeah. So
Bitsy.
Mary became increasingly paranoid. Like I said, she was sleeping in armor and she had a sword or knife under her pillow. She also became increasingly ill, and the theory is I think that she had some sort of cancer, so like an ovarian cancer,
Oh.
or something like that, and that actually killed her. Like she actually died
Oh, so
of
she was not ousted.
no, she died. She died a legitimate death. She had Elizabeth's death warrant in front of her a number of times. There was one particular rebellion, and this resulted in that 9-day Queen Jane being finally killed after being in prison for a year. There's a guy named Wyatt, and he started a riot, and Elizabeth was implicated in it. She was still a
Wyatt
young
started
guy.
a riot.
Wyatt
A
riot,
guy
yeah.
named Wyatt who started a riot.
He started a rebellion. And Elizabeth was implicated. So Mary had a death warrant brought up and she was put into the tower and questioned. And at one point, it was, anybody's guess whether she was actually going to be executed. It was that close. And I think Mary finally, I don't know, either there was the psychosis that wasn't there for her sister, or she realized it was a sister. She decided no, she wasn't going to kill her. So she was put under house arrest, basically, and for the rest of Mary's life. And then once Mary died, Mary supporters kind of had to crawl to Elizabeth and say, yeah, sorry about putting you in the tower. You're now queen. Hi.
Wow.
And the nice thing about Elizabeth is she didn't actually do the whole reprisal thing like Wu did. She actually she kept a lot of Mary's counselors in place just because, continuity. She brought in a few of her own people. William Cecil was the guy I was trying to think of before. He was her advisor, and he started up her spy network for her. So she actually was, she kind of hit the ground running with Mary's help after her death, anyway. But yeah, she nearly lost her head at Mary's hand.
So,
But towards the end of her life, she was okay. So she was killing all of these. If she
yeah.
didn't, okay, so she didn't have a spark of psychosis when she was because of her upbringing, and if she didn't have it before she started killing Protestants, after she had it and she started wearing armor and sleeping with weapons, there was definitely something going on there,
Mm-hmm.
like something. Either one contributed to the other, or it was already there, or and I don't know, maybe there was a bloodlust and it was inflamed. Oh God, I keep saying that. I'm sorry. Um, Not on purpose. I swear. I'm not normally this clever. Um, I don't know. There was definitely something
There
off
had to have
about her.
been a spark, yeah, for sure.
Spark. See?
Maybe it's
um,
from that guy named Wyatt who started a riot.
Yeah, I saw the poetry. Lovely.
it does sound like the beginning of a limerick.
I'll be impressed if you can do it in iambic pentameter, please. We are talking nearly Shakespeare Day, so come on, you might as well throw him in.
Right, Billy Shakes. If he really did write all of that,
Oh God, you're not one of those, are you?
I'm not one of anything.
You just like to be controversial and run.
Uh-huh.
You just like to say something controversial in a room and then run.
Well,
He just throws dynamite,
boom.
don't you?
I don't typically throw the dynamite. I'm more of the ear. I'm the instigator who, um, you know, gives the ideas to other people, and they go and throw
And
dynamite.
then with it, yeah, you go,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's nice. Yeah, I have noticed that actually. I've heard you do that a couple of times, more than a couple of times before.
Really?
Yeah, I listened to the show.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so we've got these two rulers. There are other rulers. We'll be discussing another one, I guess, next
Yeah.
week. Um, Out of these two rulers, let's see, who do we? Okay, it's got to be Wu who wins, right?
What's the measure? What's
Okay, so if we go with straight body count, Mary's got around 300. Wu took out 12 lines of a family. That's got to be more than 300, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, okay, so from a body count point of view, Wu wins, hands down.
And longevity. Wu
And
wins.
yeah, she actually lived well into her 80s, which was actually also unusual for the time. So yeah, she was taking levers right up until her 80s. So definitely wins. Okay, so what about um, not necessity, but like political necessity? Who's more justified in the life they led?
Mm.
Too justified. That's, I don't
Okay,
know.
justified might be a hard, but who can you? It's hard to say excuse them. Who's more justified? Who's more sympathetic? Who's more like, you know? I'm gonna have to use justified, but it's not quite the word I want.
I think I
Um,
know what you mean. I think
but
what you're
given the
going.
time, but given the time and the place of each of these two
Expediency? Is
women,
that more of
I was thinking as
uh,
you were talking about Wu that it would have been interesting to get her take on ruling. Had she, let's say, wrote a book like Machiavelli the Prince,
oh well,
it'd be
see,
something to read.
funny you should say that. She did write poetry, and she did write a book of rules for,
for
like
torture?
her. Well, yeah, there's that, but there's another. She's actually written some beautiful poetry, and there's a book of stories I think that she wrote that they still have. Like I said, Chinese history is remarkably well documented. It's I'd love
Mm,
to be able to get over there and study some. But yeah, they actually still do have her writings. It'd
Well,
be interesting to
that's
see that.
Go ahead.
I just think it'd be interesting to see the type of stories she told. Like, I don't think she wrote anything politically overt, but it'd be interesting to see the type of stories to see if you could glean anything from it.
Hmm.
You
But
make
I'm,
me you brought up a question in my mind and regarding poetry and psychopathy.
yeah.
Can those things coexist in the same mind? Do we have
Um,
examples of that?
oh God, yeah.
It's
Well, there's no, okay, well, depends. I know depression and artistic, like that sort of thing. Definitely. Like, there's so many artists that have either killed themselves or
oh
cut
yeah,
off body parts, or, and there's so many writers who have, depressed writers and depressed artists
but
and
I mean like
photographers, but
sociopaths, psychopaths.
psychopaths. I don't know. Do any of the modern guys, did they actually write? I know
Uh,
um,
I know
what's
quite a
his?
few of them draw.
yeah,
Um,
my point being is that poetry typically invokes. I mean, you're trying to invoke an emotion in the reader, right? That's kind of the point of it. And
yeah.
that seems really which means you have to understand that emotion in the reader, which means you have to have some mechanism for experiencing it yourself. I don't think a psychopath can do that.
But you're looking at poetry as a, this is how you study it in high school. Remember, in China, poetry is like completely, it's different.
Mm,
It's not just what you're saying, it's how you're saying it. It's the syllables you use, it's the characters you use. It's an art form. It's a brush. Like I learned a little bit of it, like Japanese brush work, just to do, just for practice, and Chinese brush work similar. But the way that you get into a Zen state when you're creating the characters of your poem and things like that, it's not this. I'm not sure it's the same. And remember, she grew up as a concubine, and one of the things that an educated concubine does is write poetry. It's one of the things that
yeah.
you're valued for. So I don't know. I'd have to look and see when the poetry was from. Like, if it was pre her becoming emperor, or sorry, empress,
Hmm.
that might be different. If it's post, it would be interesting to read it, actually.
Yeah.
It, Israel Keys wrote poetry.
Oh, I was going to say,
Alaska, Alaska serial killer. I put the note in the chat.
Okay.
didn't
Send.
didn't Gacy write short stories or something? Didn't he keep a diary or?
Uh, Good question. I'm not sure, and I want to say BTK did.
I know one of them did, one of the big ones, like, you know what I mean by the big ones,
Yeah.
like, this is going to sound stupid, but have you ever seen American Horror Story Hotel, the episode where all the serial killers show up?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so someone in that room keeps a diary, and I can't remember which one it is. Not from the show,
Oh.
but I remember reading that one of the people portrayed in that room is one of those serial killers. And I know Gacy was there. I know Eileen was there. I know it wasn't Eileen. I thought it was anyway.
Yeah,
But as far as
BTK wrote it too.
But as far as actual poetry, I don't know of any serial killers who write poetry. But again, it's a very Chinese thing. It's a very
Yeah.
classical Chinese thing to do. So it could be just,
Well,
you
and
know,
you bring up a good point. Is she would have had, you know, very regimented training in that skill, as
yeah,
opposed to a modern American who would have to have some interest in it to pick it up.
exactly. Yeah. It was part of classical training.
Yeah.
Well, you want to hear one of BTK's?
Okay, go on.
Maybe.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking maybe I
This
should
is
listen.
called Black Friday Poem. Just a quick glance and I knew all was lost. I saw her in real life. Now going on the mind view, the black and white were now my new boss. I saw my loved ones in mind and thoughts that I would never be able to touch, hold, communicate closely with, and kiss with care will now be at bay. I saw the black side of me was now caught and others would not suffer from my lots. But then it dawned on me, it was not as I thought. Yes, the other in me will cause no suffering. The living remained, the mother, brothers, sisters, children, close friends, and wife will suffer. Ends the real me of blood, flesh, and mind will suffer. The suspect.
Hmm.
Wow.
I read that as written, so the grammatical fuck ups. Yeah.
That's actually amazing.
SIC after those.
That's pretty amazing.
Did I put that site in there? Hold on just a second. Put that site in the chat.
There's a lot going on in that poem. Wow.
They got a lot of them on this page.
So back to the original scorecard.
Yeah.
Overall, I'm kind of thinking I'm liking Wu more than Mary, and here's just one reason. One reason is that Wu did a lot of good shit for her country, and Mary just kind of burned people.
This is true. This is true. Okay, so basically this month, this Mother's Day, Real Female Killers Month, we should keep a leaderboard.
Oh, okay.
And I
And
think
and
we've got Wu is number one right now, and Mary Tudor is second, just because we've only done the two.
yeah,
So someone
and
will have to
the
keep
and the contest is what who do we like the best? Who was more uh,
just justified. Is that
justified? Yeah,
who's more justified in their behavior, given the circumstances, given the
right,
context? So by that I mean the time and the culture and
right.
etc. Okay.
And under just that, easily Wu, because Mary actually didn't have to burn anybody,
Yeah,
and
but she
and
believed that she had to. So we have to look at it from her point of view. She actually fervently believed that she was doing good. There's been
yeah,
psychological analysis of her, and she was so convinced that God made her queen or ruler of the country to bring the country back to God, to bring the country back to Rome, that she did this. She, honest to God, thought she was saving people's souls and saving the entire country. So,
hmm.
looking at it from her point of view, she was perfectly justified. But then
Well,
looking at it from,
yeah,
it's,
everybody feels like the bad shit they did is
yeah,
justified. So I don't think that's enough of a
yeah.
perspective.
And Wu actually admitted that she knew she had done some bad crap. So she actually admitted it and did the golden tablet thing.
Right.
Even if it was only ceremonial and sort of like she still made the effort, I guess. I don't know.
Well, she had a little bit of introspection going on, I guess.
I guess either that or someone dropped a bug in her ear that you're getting old. You might want to start thinking about your afterlife.
Right. Yeah. Make amends. Well, you can't bring anybody back, so golden tablet it is.
Golden tablet. And she didn't actually admit to, like, she just admitted to sinning. She didn't like admit to specific things, because like the golden tablet would be huge if she did that.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, she admitted to being a sinner her entire life.
Wow.
So
So
okay, so far leaderboard, Wu is it.
Wu's it.
Okay.
Yeah. I think she's gonna be hard to dislodge, actually.
Yeah, well, next week is, I know who we're doing next week, so that's going to be an interesting one.
Remind me. Tell the audience. I mean,
The
You're
Blood Countess.
oh, Bathory.
Yep.
Yeah. Apparently, this we talked about last night. This apparently there's these what do they call them? Vampire facials, where they inject blood into people's face.
Oh, I heard that.
Huh?
People got HIV
Weird.
because of it. That's just horrible.
Yeah. I mean, if you were gonna do a spa like that, how could you not name it Madame Bathory's?
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
Because that's
Uh,
you're using blood to try and keep your youthful appearance.
it'd be even better if they had like mud baths and spa baths, because Bathory.
Ah, yeah,
See,
absolutely.
that's what happens. Yeah, that's what happens when I actually try. When I don't try, it's much funnier.
Often the case.
Yep. Okay, so I'm not sure what the winner gets. I don't know, a sparkly tiara or something.
Yeah, they get a Mother's Day present, I think.
A temporary turn down of the flames, scarring them in hell.
If they have any kids left that are willing to give them a Mother's Day present, yeah, sure. I'm not sure Wu did. Oh no, Wu had one son that. Oh, actually, Wu actually did have a daughter. She had a daughter that I didn't mention who did live and actually did come on to be quite powerful. So she had a bit of a legacy.
Okay. Yeah, we'll have to come up with some kind of leaderboard graphic. That'll be cool.
That would be
And by
awesome.
we, I mean Becky.
Oh, poor Becky. Hi, Becky.
All right. Well, I think that's going to wrap it up for us today.
I
I
would say so.
appreciate you being on again, Kelly Evans,
Not a
and
problem. Love it.
it's always fun having you here. And I'll say goodnight, and we'll see y'all next week.
Good night.
Good night.